And welcome to this video on looking at reasons for monitoring performance and specifically around explaining why we monitor performance during a PDP. So today we're going to talk about monitoring. Remember that monitoring is an ongoing process and it's all about checking for progress. If you think about this in terms of a real life situation, if somebody was in hospital, the doctors and nurses would be constantly monitoring their progress to see if the treatment that they are giving them is working. And it's the same idea here with your skills or with your fitness PDP or with a PDP for any factor, whether that be mental, emotional or social. We're going to constantly look and monitor and check to see if our training program is working. The main methods of monitoring that we're going to talk about today would be either through retesting or by using a training diary. But remember, we can also monitor by checking our goals and our short-term targets to see if we're progressing towards our long-term target. So why do we monitor performance? What is the whole purpose of it? Well, it allows us to compare back to the baseline to see if we've improved. It also allows us to check and see if we have met our short-term and medium-term targets on the way to trying to meet our long-term target. So for example, if our long-term target was to improve our smash in badminton, we would be setting a variety of short-term and medium-term goals that are going to help us to get towards that long-term target. And if we've met the short and medium-term targets, then we're going to look to increase the difficulty of those and set some new goals so that we're continuously challenging ourselves to progress. Now, if we see that we're meeting these goals and targets, that's going to help to make us feel good. We're going to build some confidence and we're also going to continue to build that desire to improve. So we're going to aid our motivation. If we're using the monitoring process correctly and we're seeing progress, if we see that our skills are getting better or we're getting fitter, it allows us to judge to see if the training is working. And from there, we can then start to make some adaptations. So the adaptations might be to, if we were using fartlek training, for example, to increase the number of minutes that we use fartlek training for. It could be that we take the walking session out of fartlek training. It could be if it was an emotional PDP, if we were doing deep breathing, rather than doing 5 10-second breaths for deep breathing, we might then move that to 4 because we're getting a little bit more proficient at it and we're not needing as many breaths to reduce our anxiety level. And lastly, it'll give us some feedback about whether or not we're getting better, how we're performing, and if the PDP is working. So we're going to start to look at explaining reasons why we would monitor a PDP during it. So remember, this is an explain question, so we want to use the point, example, explain structure here, and for our explanation we're going to use terms like this means that to start off our answer. To make our point, we're going to try and use the words of the question to form our point, then we're going to input a reason, and if we can, we're going to try and give an example to give our answer a bit of breadth and depth. So we're going to look at this question, explain why it's important to monitor performance during a PDP. So this is basically asking you, why do you have to check for progress during your PDP? It's important to monitor performance during a PDP to make adaptations. So that's our point. Here comes the example. For example, if my retest, so that's the method we're using, shows that I'm improving my CRE level, I can make changes to make the program harder. And I've then given an example of that. A change I made was to increase my fartlek session from 20 minutes to 25 minutes. This means after I have monitored, I can make my program harder to ensure that I continuously progress during the PDP. Here's the second point. It's important to monitor performance during a PDP to aid motivation. For example, if my training diary shows my skill level improving from week to week, I'm able to see evidence that I'm improving and begin to feel good about myself. This means I will have evidence that I'm making progress and be determined to keep working hard to improve my performance as a result. So we're going to improve our motivation. And lastly, it's important to monitor performance during a PDP to track our progress. For example, if I check my short-term goals weekly, I can see how I'm progressing towards my long-term goal. This means I can ensure I'm making progress towards my long-term goal, and if I'm seeing that I'm meeting my targets, this will build my confidence and motivation levels to keep working hard. And lastly, I can then set some new short-term goals to keep me focused during the PDP once I have met my targets. Hope you found this video useful on reasons for monitoring. There's more information about monitoring methods and what is monitoring and what is evaluating on my YouTube channel. Thanks very much.